All the cleaning is done by me. And don't you dare talk about the kitchen as if you don't march in there and eat everything you can get your grubby hands on after everyone is asleep.
I'm not doing a woman's job, and as if I'd eat your cooking. Ken, you made a massive mistake marrying this bitch. I hit him as hard as I could. I feel bad now, looking back on it. I'm sure my kids were watching, and I think I still had some of the adrenaline from my house being on fire. But we had our fight on the front lawn, rolling around, punching each other.
Hello, my name is Sarah, and I'm a stay-at-home mother of 2. My husband Ken and I got married 4 years ago just after college. I should mention that Ken's family has always been terrible. His father died of alcoholism when he was young, and his mother, Leah, always hated me for stealing her baby boy away from her. His brother only ever calls my husband to ask for more money to support his sports gambling addiction or pay off bad debt, despite working full-time in construction. Even at our wedding, his family kept making offhand comments about my dress or how bad the food was, as if they were ready for it to be over. To say that they are a nightmare in my life is an understatement, but we only have to deal with them around the holidays. It came as no surprise when we heard that Ken's brother Sam lost his construction job and was evicted from his apartment soon after. In fact, we had expected it. Sam was always horrible with his money and spending habits. It wasn't until his mother turned up at our front door telling Ken to let him stay with us that I realized how naive I was. If only I knew then what would happen afterwards.
You're the older brother. It's your responsibility to look after your younger brother.
He's almost 35 years old. It's his own fault that he got himself into this mess.
It doesn't matter how. What matters is that it's your responsibility. You have a spare couch in the living room, don't you?
Mom, I'm not having my kid's uncle crash in the living room. That's not right.
So you would rather have him sleep on the street?
That's not what I meant.
Good. I'll tell him to pack his things.
Sam was always the slob of the family, and that was saying something. I don't think he's ever owned a piece of clothing that wasn't either stained or torn. My fear of him sleeping in the living room was imagining my kids wading through the trash and tripping over stray pillows he'd leave around just to get to the kitchen. Within 2 hours of my mother-in-law appearing at our front door, he pulled up the driveway in a badly damaged and smoke-stained car that looked like it was on its last legs. She must have called him as soon as she left to tell him to drive over. It looked like he had been living out of his car for the last few days.
Hey, buddy. Thanks for letting me stay with you until I'm back on my feet. Here, can you carry this inside?
Oof, this is heavy. What's in here?
Oh, just an old comic book collection. You have space for it, don't you?
I looked at my husband, but he just shrugged. His car was packed with loose belongings, things that wouldn't even sell at a garage sale. Lots of trash mixed in with old jackets and boxes that smelled like cigarette smoke. Some of the neighbors started watching us unpack his car, and I felt embarrassed by it. I told myself that it was only for a little while and that we'd do the same for my family. We piled his stuff in the corner of the living room, agreeing to find a better place to store it in the morning. It nearly overflowed onto the floor, and I half thought about setting up the kids' safety gate around it just to contain it all. It was already almost dinner time, and I hadn't started cooking yet. Ken went upstairs to get spare pillows and blankets. I went into the kitchen to start preparing the meal, and Sam followed me in.
So, what's for dinner?
I'm just making a simple lasagna. It's the kids' favorite.
Lasagna is my favorite too. I doubt you could make it better than my mom, though.
Better than Leah? I can certainly try.
I doubt that. From what I can tell, you've never been a good cook.
Excuse me?
Here you go. A place to sleep for the night.
Ken came down with the supplies and brought Sam into the living room. I pulled Ken aside afterwards and told him what Sam had said, but he insisted I don't take it to heart. His family had always said harsh things, and they didn't mean it to be insulting. I sighed and let it go. For the first little while of him staying, I thought that maybe I had overreacted. Maybe I would feel better about him staying after he showered. After all, he was my husband's brother, and it was the right thing to do. Those thoughts went out the window after dinner. I always set my lasagna on the stove to rest after I take it out of the oven, and I left the room. When I came back, over half of it was gone. There was barely enough left for me and the kids. When I asked Sam about it, he denied eating any and said it must have been the kids. It continued like that over the weekend and into next week. Food around the house would go missing, the bathroom would be left a stinking disaster, and Sam would reuse old clothes instead of doing laundry. Can you ask him how long he plans on staying for? It's already been 2 weeks and I don't think he's applied to any jobs.
Yeah, I can do that. Is he bugging you that much?
Well, I'd certainly like my living room back. I'm afraid to even go into it when he's not there, and he stays up watching TV so late that the kids have a hard time sleeping from the noise. You already told him last week to keep it down. Also, could you tell him to stop smoking in the house? The other day I caught him napping on the sofa while holding a lit cigarette.
Good point. I'll talk to him in the morning. Hey, how's it going? Going good. How about yourself? Good. Listen, I need to talk to you about some stuff. How long are you planning on staying for? Have you applied to any jobs yet? Dude, you don't have to be an asshole about it. You want me to be homeless? You think it's easy to get a job? That's not what I said. I'm asking a simple question. Why don't you ask your wife to get a job? Why can't she help out around here? Half the time, the kitchen isn't even cleaned properly. What does she do all day anyways? First of all, leave her out of this. Second, you don't do anything all day either. When was the last time you left the house, besides doing a beer run? I haven't seen you move from that couch. You spend all day watching reruns and football. You need to get it together. Also, can you stop smoking in the house? It's a fire hazard. I was infuriated. I stormed away and marched upstairs, and by the time I was back in my bedroom, I already had a missed call from my mother. She yelled at me for what I said to my brother, calling me inconsiderate and cruel. I told her that it wasn't right and that I had a family to take care of. She argued back that we are your family and that your wife is just your wife. At this, I was so angry, I hung up the phone. When I went downstairs, I found Sam had already started drinking, smoking, and watching TV again, and ignored me.
I woke up in the middle of the night to the smell of smoke. I jumped out of bed, faster than I could wake up, and raced out the bedroom door. Already, the top floor was a haze of thick black smoke, and I started coughing. I called for Ken to wake up, and I went into my kids' rooms to wake them up. I put both on either shoulder, carrying them downstairs, covering their mouths with their pajamas. When we were outside, I put them on the lawn and turned around. The house was on fire, spreading from the kitchen to the living room and crawling up the inside of the windows. Smoke poured out from the front door. The heat and smoke made my eyes water, and I wasn't sure how I hadn't noticed it while I was still in the house. A moment later, Ken and Sam came through the front door. My kids ran up to hug my husband, and Sam looked in disbelief back at the house. Immediately, I accused him.
It wasn't me. Maybe if you had kept the kitchen in better shape and cleaned up once in a while, nothing would have set on fire.
Excuse me? Don't dare talk about the kitchen or shift blames. You most have caused this with a cigarette in your hand when you fell asleep. And as for the kitchen, you've never even offered to help with the dishes, let alone clean up after yourself. All the cleaning is done by me. And don't you dare talk about the kitchen as if you don't march in there and eat everything you can get your grubby hands on after everyone is asleep.
I'm not doing a woman's job, and as if I'd eat your cooking. Ken, you made a massive mistake marrying this bitch. I hit him as hard as I could. I feel bad now, looking back on it. I'm sure my kids were watching, and I think I still had some of the adrenaline from my house being on fire. But we had our fight on the front lawn, rolling around, punching each other. I don't remember how long we rolled around, but it took 2 of the neighbors and a few firemen to pull us apart, so I knew it lasted until the firemen got there. After that, we gave our statements to the police, and the firefighters put out what remained of our home. The top floor was gone, including all of the kids' belongings. We got set up in a nearby hotel, without Sam, and tried to sleep away the few hours left of the early morning. I stopped responding to my mom's phone calls, and I blocked my brother soon after.
From what we're told after, the fire had been started from a lit cigarette that was left unattended. Sam apparently had lit it, and then forgotten about it and went to sleep. It had apparently fallen on garbage that he had left on the kitchen table, and had ignited. It took over pretty quickly from there. We were told that we were lucky to have made it out alive. The worst of it was smoke inhalation for Ken and Sam, which resulted in some small coughing from my husband and numerous phone calls from my mother-in-law complaining about what a horrible mother I am and what I had done to her son. Soon afterwards, we decided to go out of state and get new jobs. We didn't hear much from his family after that, and we enjoyed the peace and quiet to settle down. Obviously, we had no intention of ever contacting them again either, and we believed we could never forgive either of them for their actions and their words. However, what Sam had said to me stuck with me, and I developed insomnia. The therapist that I talked to said that it was to be expected from house fire victims and would fade with time. We knew we couldn't sue Sam for physical or emotional damages since he was bordering on bankruptcy at any moment. But we were happy enough to never speak to him again anyways. We later found out that Sam had used up the rest of his mother's savings, trying to pay off his sports gambling debts. Leah ended up having to sell her house just to make enough for retirement. It had been over a year, and now they both live together in a trailer park, and my mother-in-law and Sam have to pick up a minimal wage jobs to make ends meet. I hear they flip burgers in a tiny restaurant, while our family lives in a larger house than we had before with mountains all around. The greatest part is that we'll never have to see them again. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying, "I subscribed," and we will try our best to reply to your comment.
On my sister's third-month celebration, my mom announced that she'd be going out into the streets to feed a few beggars. Her fans all contributed some amount of money to her as support. However, rather than feeding real beggars, my mom and her boyfriend hired a few people, had them pretend to be beggars, and position in the places they'd planned to visit. My name is Chris. It's my 15th birthday today, and my adoptive parents are putting things up for my birthday party. It all still feels like a dream because I'd never had a birthday celebration. My real mother never acknowledged it when I was with her. You might be wondering why I'm with adoptive parents. Well, my mother was obsessed with social media and couldn't care less about her children. All she was focused on was her fame and the money it made her. She was ready to do anything to maintain it. At the tender age of 3, I knew what a camera was as my mother was always putting it in my face. She got famous first by using me. To her fans, I was a disabled child. My mother would force bitter tablets in my mouth before turning on the camera. The tablets made me drool uncontrollably, and sometimes made me throw up. I was forced to pretend to not know how to speak whenever she turned the camera on. I was also made to start using a wheelchair from age 6, even though I had no problem walking, because she didn't want anyone knowing about my true state of health. She didn't send me to a regular school. She had her elder sister, who was a teacher, homeschool me. My aunt was bad in her own way. I never understood what she taught, as she was always in a rush. And when I made a small mistake, I got the beating of my life. When I was 9, my mom got pregnant with my younger sister. Every day, she would sit in front of her camera, fake crying and asking her followers to pray for her, as she was stressed enough by me and didn't want another disabled child. One day, before starting her usual live sessions, she asked me to throw up in front of the camera while being fed. I refused. "Why should I do that, Mom? I never throw up while eating."
Are you talking back to your mother? You must do as I say if you don't want to experience death. Do you understand?
I was scared because I didn't want to die. Once she started the live session, she began talking about a community of disabled children she recently started taking care of from some of the money she made from her job as a chef. And as always, she talked about how stressful it was, combining all that with me, her disabled son. I couldn't believe how much lies she was making up. Firstly, she hardly ever left the house, so the community of disabled children, which she claimed to be funding, didn't exist. Also, she wasn't a chef. What my mother did was prepare food at home and lie to them that it was for customers. And I wasn't disabled. I could do everything within the capacity of a normal child. While telling all those lies, she kept feeding me pudding, knowing how much I got irritated by even the sight of it. When I couldn't take it anymore, I was forced to throw up. My mother let out a scream, feigning shock. I looked up to her and realized that tears had quickly formed in her eyes.
Why are you doing this to me, Jake?
My mom never called me by my real name in front of her followers. I was known as Jake. She was in tears. I mean, she'd wanted a reaction from me, and that's why she forcefully fed me the pudding. Did she have to cry?
Why are you making me so sad?
I couldn't break out of the character she'd created for me, so all I could do was stare at her while she ranted. She had to finish up the live session earlier than planned. A few months later, my sister was born. Although she was only my half-sister, I loved her. My mom's boyfriend, Brian, who'd been living with us for a year, was the father of my sister. I had no idea who my father was, or if he was still alive somewhere. One night, a few months after my sister was born, I left my room to get water in the kitchen, and overheard my mom and her boyfriend discussing ways they could involve my sister in her deceit. I quickly burst into the kitchen. "I'm not gonna let you do that, Mom," I told her.
You little rat. How much more do I have to warn you to watch your mouth?
"He's not gonna learn with just words. I'll teach him the hard way." That night, I was given the beating of my life. While my mom stood and watched, her boyfriend hit me to the extent that my ankle got broken and a huge lump appeared on my forehead. I crawled back to my room in heavy tears and pain. The next day, when her followers asked what happened to me, she lied that I'd fallen from the staircase while she went away to empty the trash can. After that, she revealed that she had a huge reveal to make. Now, my mom had never shown what my sister looked like to her audience. When she suddenly brought her from her room, I was shocked to see my sister having extremely long hair. The previous night, she still had her short, curly hair. As much as I badly wanted to ask what was going on, I had to save it until the live was over. My mother lied and said that my sister was born with very long hair, which grew extraordinarily fast. She further stressed that she'd cut my sister's hair off twice since birth, but the hair grew so quickly. In reality, when my sister was born, she barely had any hair on her head. But of course, my lying mother always had everything planned out. Her followers immediately took a liking to my sister. That day, my mother made more money than she'd ever gotten. I knew because I overheard her again while she was talking about it with her boyfriend. "She's more profitable than that son of yours. This is why we should sell him off." My jaw dropped in shock. He'd been proposing for my mom to sell me?
Right? We should sell him and tell everyone he got lost. He's beginning to piss me off lately.
I couldn't believe my ears. I ran back to my room without the water I'd gone for. For the next few weeks, my sister appeared more in front of our mom's camera than I did. As much as it made me happy that I was gradually getting freed, I felt bad for my sister, who had to endure wearing that uncomfortable wig every day. On my sister's third-month celebration, my mom announced that she'd be going out into the streets to feed a few beggars. Her fans all contributed some amount of money to her as support. However, rather than feeding real beggars, my mom and her boyfriend hired a few people, had them pretend to be beggars, and position in the places they'd planned to visit. My mother also had us take a tasteless pill that sent us into dreamland a few minutes later, before she and Brian took the cameras and left the house. I woke up hours later to find a sachet of the pills forgotten in my room. I quickly grabbed it and hid it under my bed. The videos of them feeding the beggars went viral in the media, getting her even more fans, and of course, more money. Seeing that more money was brought from the new scheme, my mom decided to add that to using us. On some days, we would appear on her camera. On other days, she'd go out to feed her hired beggars. For a moment, I did think their plan to sell me off was no longer going to happen, until I walked in on them discussing it in the living room. I quickly hid behind the curtain to avoid being seen. Brian had already made the negotiations with the buyers, and they'd be coming during the night of the following day. Sweat gathered in my face as I trembled in fear. I returned to my room and thought deeply about how to prevent it. I needed to protect my sister from being a victim of that in the future. After a long time, I finally figured out what to do. The next day, my mom ordered me to bring Brian and her a glass of water each. That was my chance. I quickly took 2 of the pills and dissolved them in each glass of water before taking it to them. A few minutes later, when I returned to the living room, they were both resting on each other, deeply asleep. I quickly grabbed my mom's phone. I unlocked it, and following how I'd been watching her begin her live session, I started one. Of course, her fans were surprised seeing me alone on their screens. "Hello everyone, I'm Chris, not Jake. Jake doesn't exist, and I'm not disabled. I've never been disabled," I revealed to them. Comments flowed in, all expressing their shock. I told them all about my mother's tricks, and also their plans to sell me off that night and disguise it to look like a robbery. I also revealed how I'd put them to sleep using the same pill she used on my sister and I. Then I called out our home address and begged them to contact the police before the buyers arrived. Luckily, they were quick to respond. I kept the live going, and soon, a police vehicle pulled into the driveway. The cops came in and hid inside and outside the house. Afterward, I turned off the live. The buyers arrived a few minutes later. They barged into the living room and found my mom and Brian asleep. What's going on? I was hiding behind the chairs with the cops. Next thing we heard was another voice saying they should leave. We immediately got out of our hiding place. On seeing the cops, the buyers quickly pulled out their guns. I'll shoot if you come any closer. Hearing their threat, the cop beside me clicked on a device behind him, and in a second, 5 policemen quietly walked in through the open door. Before the buyers could attack, the cops hit them on their heads with their guns and sticks, causing them to collapse to the floor. We were all taken to the station, my mom and Brian still asleep. Once we got to the station, a child care agency was immediately contacted, and we were taken away by them. My mom and Brian woke up hours later and found themselves in a cell with the buyers who regained consciousness before them. From what I heard from some of the child care staff, they also used to be fans of my mom. She'd lost all her followers, and her account had been brought down after a lot of people reported it for fraud. A week later, they were taken to court. My mom, Brian, and the buyers all claimed to be not guilty, but all evidence pointed to the opposite. Throughout the trial, my mom continuously sent piercing glares at me, but I refused to be intimidated, and when it was my turn, I gave my testimony and told the courtroom everything that had actually been happening. My mom was sentenced to 17 years imprisonment for fraud, child abuse, and attempted human trafficking. Brian was given 15 for child abuse and attempted human trafficking, while each of the buyers got 20 years. Each for human trafficking, as investigation revealed that they'd been doing it for years. Before she was taken away to prison, my mother glared at my sister and I.
I hope you both never received love from anyone.
It was quite harsh for a mother to say that to her children. The child care agency took good care of us until it was time to take us to an adoption center. We were only there for 2 weeks before our adoptive parents came and adopted both of us. We've been with them for nearly 5 years. I'm in my last year in junior school, and my sister's almost done with her primary education. I haven't seen my mom since that day at the courthouse, and I sincerely wish I never do again. Life is better without her. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment.